Hello and welcome to Türkiye Talks. As usual, we are going to talk about recent international developments. There is one important event this week in Prague. We are going to talk about the European Political Community Summit. I'm working on studying on Turkey's foreign policy and security issues, and like as every week, we are going to talk about this international situation. European political community, when I read about it, when I look at the structure, the composition of the countries, nations which are in it, it actually reminded me 1990 Paris Conference, European Conference on European Security. Remember, it was the end of the Soviet Union, 1990s. All the European countries, including Russians, they were in Paris to talk about a new Europe. So this was the idea. We have a similar community except Russia. So maybe we can start from this point, Valeria. Do you agree? Do you share my observation? It was 1990s. It was a new Europe, bringing both sides together, the former Soviet Union and former communist countries with the Western world. Now there is a similar organization except Russia. Does it mean a new Europe after 2022? Another, maybe with a different nature?
Well, it's a bit ironic because, the international system has changed meanwhile, and the challenges have been changed. But still, before it was European Community in 1990s, then in 1991, after the Maastricht Treaty, it became a European Union. And still, it seems that politically, after so many years, we are stuck in the same point. Again, there is this need of enlarging the Union, of becoming a real international actor with political aspiration, to create a sort of, to expand the influence of Europe in the region, to enforce also the dialogue and the cooperation with countries that they are partner of European Union, but they are not even within the process of becoming a EU member state, because of course we see that there are some peculiar countries such as Turkey that they have started already the negotiation process, and they are, despite all problems that Ankara is facing, but still on paper they are in the process of becoming EU member. But there are some other countries that they are not really related, they are not included yet in this enlargement process. So it seems that we went back to the point one, even though the international system has changed, even though the challenges have been changed. Nowadays we are still facing with the Russian threat. In that time, in the 90s, the bipolar system collapsed. So we did not have a direct threat coming from Russia. Indeed, some states gravitating under the Soviet Union influence were also admitted to the platform. But nowadays, unfortunately, we have to deal with the threats, I would say, coming from Russia, but more than Russia, from the Ukraine and Russia conflict. And I'm speaking mainly about the energy issues, inflation rate as well, that is just hitting all the European countries and all regional countries, the hiking in the prices of electricity, and of course this idea of instability and the precariousness that is coming from the region. So it seems that this time the architect of the European political community is France, led by Macron. And it seems that there is this need of fostering the dialogue and the cooperation, and to find a sort of strategic space in order to contain the threat coming from Russia and from the Black Sea basin, and in order to also guarantee a sort of security in energy supply as well. So I would say that, yes, this is a new format, because before, actually, we did not experience such a thing. I think now I have the feeling that there is the will of creating a sort of platform, basically. And there is also more awareness that at political level, a political understanding, European Union has a lot of legs. I mean, needs to assess itself, needs to understand what kind of international actor want to be and what kind of vision needs to follow in order to arise as a real actor within the international regional system.
I have tons of questions in my mind. It's a very important meeting, important summit, providing a lot of data to analyze. One of them is maybe we can talk about, as you said, this the French president is behind this organization. So one question comes to my mind after Brexit, after the departure of German Chancellor Merkel. Is Germany is losing its position? This is one of the questions that can be asked. Again, you also mentioned the international system is changing. So to which direction, what kind of analysis can we make out of it? Countries like Turkey and United Kingdom, which are out of EU, now they are part of this bigger picture. Lots of questions in my mind, but I want to leave the for the word to Kadir. Kadir, do you have something to ask, or do you want to comment on these, or maybe you can add more questions to this discussion?
Yes, I actually want to make a couple comments. This is very interesting. Of course, the European political community is going to be a meeting of 44 countries, 17 non-EU members, and it includes countries like Armenia, Azerbaijan, even Qatar. So it's not just countries that aspire to become EU members, but also countries with geopolitical relevance for what's happening in Europe, in Ukraine. With regard to your question about Germany, I would like to pitch in and say, Germany was able to handle the migration issue, which was a result of geopolitical troubles in the Middle East. But when it came to Ukraine, we saw that American leadership still mattered a lot more than because confronting Russia in a serious way could not happen with EU countries only, and we saw that. So I think EU is, Macron talked about NATO being brain dead and all that in the past. But I think this summit is a realization that EU's, 27 countries, and then some countries who want to be members and who are on the periphery of EU, these countries, what happens in those countries matters to the EU. So you cannot isolate EU and say, look, we have great economic, cooperation and we are safe and democratic and all that. But regional shifts and geopolitical changes will impact Europe in a serious way. We saw that during the refugee crisis, which many people migrant crisis, the broader migrant crisis, which many people would say was the reason for Brexit. So it did actually have a direct impact on the EU. And then when Ukraine war came along, the challenge has become much bigger. And that realization, I think, is important for EU. And this seems to be this preliminary, perhaps, effort to provide a solution. Why don't we, broaden the political conversation to a much larger set of countries? That seems to be the sort of driving force in this. What I would like to ask Valeria is, there's a lot of talk about, energy security, and Europe is entering the winter, And there's this current counteroffensive in Ukraine. I think Ukrainians want to prove that they can actually retrieve all of their lands before, it's winter, and perhaps it could be also related to this summit to send a message to the summit. But do you feel like Europeans can survive this winter in terms of, energy resources? They've done a lot to shift away from Russia, but do you think this is going to be enough? And do you think this is going to be the top of the agenda in Prague?
Definitely, it's going to be a very hot issue that the European leaders are called to address. And definitely, it's going to be a very hard winter for all of us. What is happening nowadays in the European bloc is that there are different stances related to energy and how to deal with energy crisis. I mean, more recently, we have seen Germany, who just kept away from the directions of Brussels, and they try to develop their own national strategy. If we look, for example, of the results of the Italian elections just some days ago, again, there is this trend to protect the national interests rather than acting under the umbrella of European Union. So there is a sort of discontent on how European Union is managing the crisis and managing the energy issues. Nowadays, the main debate is related to a sort of cap prices. I mean, creating a roof for establishing a common price for electricity and for energy. But again, there are different stances and different positions. What I've seen that Europe was totally not prepared to cope with such a crisis. I mean, the diversification of energy supply was something that in Brussels and all national countries put in the position to face out of the blue. So we have been witnessing also in Italy this running after the search of new supply, going to Algeria, to Qatar, or to some other regional countries in order to sign an agreement, because we are all heavily dependent from Russia. And here there is a sort of a dilemma, because the European approach towards the Russian and Ukrainian conflict has been very harsh and is being totally pro-Ukraine. I mean, they did not even find the way for mediating, for establishing a point of contact with Moscow. And they just put sanctions on it. And those sanctions, of course, had some spillover effect on our national interest as well. So there is a huge discontent. And I do believe that if we look at the whole picture in Europe, the right parties and the right movements are increasing. It means that this idea of protecting the national interest of states is becoming dominant. And this may be a reason why Macron, in this environment where there is a sort of lack of leadership, as it was pointed out before, and if we look at the results of the elections in France as well, we saw that the right bloc is gaining power, and then there is Hungary with Orban, and then the Vox movement in Spain and also in Poland. So there is a need of compromise and to welcome and to at least accept certain part of society which is becoming very important in addressing the issues. For example, in Italy, there is a large discontent. And if we read the results of the last elections, main of discontent is also related to the Italian policies towards European Union. Because we felt a bit far away from the decision coming from Brussels. Of course, all of us nowadays, we are dealing with the increasing in the price of electricity bills. Some of the business activities are closing down. So there is pretty much concern. And this concern, it's not just a matter of national concern, but as a member of the European Union, we need to address this. But I do believe that the positive point in this initiative is the inclusion of key countries such as Turkey and Azerbaijan that they have a stake, an important stake, also Qatar, as you mentioned before. But Turkey and Azerbaijan, they are very close to Europe. I mean, we can consider that they are Mediterranean countries and they are gravitating under the European area. And they have an important role to play as a connector, as an energy hub. And overall, I think Ankara is playing a positive role in trying to channel the request of Russia and try to support Ukraine, something that the Western Bloc did not do. I mean, and I think they are not intending to do for a long time. So the only valid interlocutor that we have nowadays in Ankara, also for channeling and trying to make up a bit this energy crisis that we are unfortunately facing. It's going to be hard anyway.
Valeria, I know that Bora has questions about Turkey and Turkey's role and how it's perceived in this upcoming summit, which will start, I believe, October 6th. But I wanted to ask you a bit more about the issues you just mentioned. Populist parties remain strong. They had a good showing in Italy. The recent change in the UK of the government, Truss is now the prime minister, but Truss is going to this summit. So although we have these populist movements, they seem to have kind of less anti-EU in some ways. Do you think that's true? And do you think that if it's true, it's because of what happened in Ukraine? What do you think?
I think that these populist movements, they are not anti-EU. I mean, they have their own interpretation of being European. What they really challenge is this interpretation of European Union as a sovereign body who is ruling out on the national states. While, for example, Giorgia Meloni in Italy, Vox in Spain, and the other populist movement would like to be represented according to the national interest of the state. And then, according to the request, creating a sort of policies and that they are just ruling out by the European Union. So it's a different idea of legitimization, I would say. It's not that they are against European Union. For example, I mean, a great debate was in Italy after the appointment of the far-right the center-right coalition government. But we are all aware that overall in Europe, after the pandemic, it was thanks to European Union and thanks to the funds of European Union, if certain states, including Italy, were able to recover. Because, they support a lot of reforming plan for resilience and restarting. So I think those parties are not rejecting this. They are just rejecting the interpretation of policies that is coming from Europe, this European Union, actually.
So maybe with this European Political Community initiative, maybe we can talk about a change of understanding in how to deal with international relations again, maybe less institutionalized when we compare with 1990s when European Community became European Union, NATO became, NATO enlarged. So maybe we will see more summits like that with less tight institutional structure. With this initiative, we have seen that countries like Turkey and United Kingdom, which are not members of the EU, still play important role for European Union security, well-being, welfare, whatever we say. Although there are problems, we know what's going on in Eastern Mediterranean, the tension between Greece and Turkey. But still, they need to come together. From that perspective, do you think that the countries outside of European Union will lose their interest to being part of the EU? And maybe from what is important for Turkey, maybe EU members will realize the importance of countries like, flag countries like Turkey and United Kingdom. What do you think about that?
I think it's not a platform or an initiative who is going to delay it or is going to overlap to the accession process or to enlargement dynamics. What they are trying to do is just trying to enlarge the scope of European Union and creating the conditions for a stronger continental partnership, of course. I mean, that's why they include countries that they are not also in the process of for the accession of European Union, such as Armenia, Qatar, and I think Israel at certain point as well. Of course, when it comes to Turkey, I think this is a peculiar position, because Turkey has been waiting for such a long time at the door of European Union. European Union did not admit yet certain mistakes towards Turkey. I mean, because of course the internal dynamics of the country have been changed since the accession process has started in 2005. But since the accession process has started in 2005, the same amount of chapters have been blocked by the same countries, such as Greece over the Cyprus issues, Cyprus as well, in some other European countries. So this has not changed. I mean, this approach, unfair, I would say, approach towards Turkey has not changed. What has changed has been the divisions towards Turkey. So after a certain point, overall, after the agreement, the so-called agreement of migrants in 2016, we have been witnessing a sort of compartmentalized cooperations in the regard of Ankara. And Ankara has started to be treated as a third country, not as a country who is enjoying the status of candidate country towards European Union. So I do believe, and I want to hope, in realistic terms, that this would help Turkey and as a member, who is waiting to join the European Union, to warm up a bit the feelings towards Turkey by putting the topics and the issues on the need of having a very valuable interlocutor, a very valuable partner, because in any hot issue and criticalities that European Union has faced, for example, the migrant issues, Turkey proved to be a valid interlocutor. I mean, they fulfilled their duty more than the European counterparts, I would say, fulfilled the duty. Now, of course, beside those challenges, we have some other challenges, but still, I think the role of Ankara is a valuable one. I mean, as I said before, Ankara is the only actor in the region, if not further than the region, who is able to speak in the same way with Moscow and with Kiev. Ankara was one of the main architects, if not the only architect, of the grain corridor, which was acknowledged at international level. And Ankara as well has a lot to play and to provide to Europe and European Union countries in terms of energy security, because, Turkey is an energy hub. It's crossed by two important pipelines, such as Turk Stream, coming from Russia through the Black Sea and then crossing Anatolia until Europe border, and by TANAP as well. So taking the energy and the gas from the Caspian Basin and then conducting it until the border with Greece. And then starting from Greece, it becomes a trans-Adriatic pipeline. So it has a lot to do, a lot to share and to provide to European Union. But of course, on the other side, I think European Union needs to understand, first of all, what kind of actor and what kind of role wants to play in the region, and what kind of approach wants to adopt towards Turkey as well. And I think, and I want to hope that this kind of platform will help to deepening the ties towards Turkey, and maybe strengthening the relations in terms of the accession process, and also in terms of strategic partnership for all the European countries as well.
Kadir, another question about Turkey, as Valeria mentioned, Turkey is the only country maybe who can reach out to Moscow and Kiev at the same time. But this is a very anti-Russian structure. I mean, this initiative, European countries there, and the countries who has problems with Russia, probably Ukrainian president's speech will be important one. Do you think joining this meeting will harm Turkey's this position, Turkey's this balanced approach to the two sides? We just, we remember just a month ago, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan was in Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and he was warmly welcomed by the other members. After that, he went to New York for the United Nations General Assembly, the summit of UN. So do you think this anti-Russian European political community, which seems so, will harm Turkey's position?
I think it's clear.
Bora?
Sorry.
Okay, please go ahead.
Shall I? I think it has been clear since the very beginning, of the crisis before and conflict after, that Turkey wouldn't put any sanctions on Russia, because this is going to play at detriment to Turkish interests as well. I mean, Turkish geographical position is a very peculiar as well. So in the interest are strictly connected to Moscow and to Kiev as well. Maybe it can be the way around. Like if I look, as I said before, to these right movements that they are taking a stage within the European framework, more or less they are just supporting what Ankara is doing in terms of mediation or in terms of approach towards Moscow and Russia. I mean, for example, the Italian government is pretty sure that, yes, it's not enough to sanctioning Russia. It's not enough, and maybe it's not so positive to sell or to give, to furnish Kiev by weapons, but we need to find a diplomatic solution to the conflict. And actually it's what exactly Turkey is trying to do, and he has been doing since the beginning of the hostilities, I would say. I think after so long time of such a unilateral approach, now it became the time to make diplomacy working on the table. And when diplomacy works, of course, you have to consider the interest of both parties, and you have to mediate and to find a solution. Even though, I mean, the feeling is that this conflict is going to last too long, and the spillover effects on Europe in terms of energy, but also stability and regional stability will be very, very negative. So I think this European Community, Political Community Summit could be also a starting point for a very genuine brainstorming on what will be the approach towards the regional crisis as well.
Let me add a couple things, Bora, because I think it may be a little, I'm not sure if we should describe it as anti-Russia, because this is, this summit includes 44 countries. Many of them have somewhat of a nuanced approach to the conflict, and Turkey is one of them, of course. Like Valeria just said, the diplomacy has to be somehow part of the solution and ongoing discussions. Isolation of Russia, sanctions, pushback, and the current counter-offensive by Ukraine, these are all good. But the political conversation, has to happen on diplomacy as well. What's the end game here? What's the end, scenario? Of course, Ukraine is a country that's been invaded. So they're going to, of course, seek to retrieve their lands, and that's justified. But that doesn't mean, there shouldn't be diplomatic efforts, and Turkey already has done a lot on that front. But at the same time, I think this political conversation that EU is starting here, of course, there won't be any serious agenda items and declarations and agreements signed, but it's probably more about the photo op in many ways. But I want to note the US won't be there, right? US is a major actor in the Ukraine scene. But so I think this idea that Europe needs to somehow think more seriously about its security, its geopolitical challenges, is kind of dawning on European leaders, and that's their effort to broaden this conversation and engage a variety of countries from the region, from the Middle East, from the Caucasus. And I don't think Turkey is going to get a lot of pushback by Russia on this. But at the same time, I don't think Turkey is trying to make Putin happy either. So that would be the wrong perception. Turkey is a strong supporter of Ukraine. It has never recognized Crimea's, annexation. It hasn't recognized this most recent annexation, which may turn out to be a complete farce if, the counteroffensive by Ukraine is successful. So Turkey is not, obviously happy with the situation, and it supports Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty. What it tries to do with Russia is it really afford to try to isolate Russia and implement sanctions that would essentially bite Turkey itself, because Putin has a lot of cash, especially in the short term. He can survive it. He can sustain this campaign, but it would really impact the Turkish economy badly. And, Turkey is trying to find a diplomatic solution, but it recognizes, President Erdogan said this, they are not ready. Neither side is ready for a deal, except for the grain deal and the prisoner exchange deal. These were very important, achievements on Turkey's part. But for the end of the war, that deal probably will have to wait, or if there will ever be a deal. It can also end in the scenario where, at least at the theoretical level, Ukraine can actually retrieve all its lands because Russian army is so is in such disarray. So given all these considerations, I think I agree with Valeria. This re-warming up of Turkey's membership talks with the EU could be good. But again, I wanted to ask Valeria, when we look at the Eastern Mediterranean, there are recent tensions between Greece and Turkey. Turkey has just signed a deal with Libya about hydrocarbon exploration in Libya as well as in its waters. Greek foreign minister made a statement that they don't, recognize this, and there's a lot of tensions. And I know Italy has some interests there and in Libya as well. And it is an Eastern Mediterranean country by my account at least. So how does Italy specifically look at the developments in the Eastern Mediterranean, especially those tensions? How can we reconcile them with Turkey's kind of re-warming up with the EU?
Well, Italy has been always trying to channeling the Turkish stances on the European table. We have been witnessing this along the crisis in 2020 and 2021. after the Ajaccio summit led by Macron and Greeks and Greek Cypriots against Turkey. So when those bunch of European countries wanted to put sanctions on Turkey, I mean, Italy has tried always to mediate and try to put on the table also the position of Ankara. Because at the end of the day, you know, Italy and Turkey belong to the same Mediterranean basin, and they share the same interest. So they have a lot of complementary interest in the region, coming from Libya, starting from Libya, for example. And it's not in the Italian interest to witness such a escalation in the area. And by the way, I do believe that this escalation needs to find a solution. And also maybe this European Political Community Summit could be a fruitful starting point. Because as long as Greece and Cyprus, in the exception of the Greek Cyprus, feel that they are backed so strongly by the European Union, they will never ever have interest to mediate, to give to concede anything. I mean, to give up, because they do not. They feel that they have everything in their hand. And by the way, being member of European Union means being backed from European countries, so they will not have any interest in mediation. While in this time, I think we need, all of us, I mean, for the sake of well-being of European Union and in the region, we need to calm down, because already the area is full of conflicts and line of fractures between states. Everything is coming. I mean, it's spilling over from Russia and Ukraine, and we don't need a further tension. So I do believe that also in this case, diplomacy needs to prevail. Because if we look carefully at the whole picture, Greece made some mistakes. I mean, in militarizing the island. Also, it contradicts some international treaty, like the Treaty of Paris that was signed before the Second World War. And it was against the militarization of the Dodecanese island as well. And then if we look at the delimitation of the maritime economic zone, then it comes obvious to our eyes that Turkey has been excluded. I mean, which is the country with the longest coastal line, has been excluded by using those areas. And there it comes the need to have a margin of action and sign an agreement with Libya. So I think the interest of Turkey and Italy overlap. Also, when it comes to the migration dossier, for example, I mean, Italy and Turkey are the main spots for migration, and both of the countries support the idea of a sustainable solution for the migration, because in this way, it's not sustainable any longer. And before, it has been mentioned the fact that Germany has led the process, trying to contain migration and managing migration within European Union. But unfortunately, this did not last. I mean, proved once again that approach wasn't sustainable. And that was one of the main reasons why this rightist movement, rightist party and governments are rising, because migration has become a main discriminant issue also in assessing the preference of the Europeans as well. So, I mean, there are many interests coming from energy. I mean, Italy and Turkey are facing the same challenges and the same opportunities in the same basin. It comes from energy, from fight against terrorism, migration, and also some economic complementarities as well. I mean, so I think the approach of the Italian government of Italy towards Turkey will not change that much, despite the fact that we've been always able to solve the small crisis that we experience. But I think Italy will keep mediating and keep challenging the stances of Ankara in the European table as well, trying to low down the tone and the severity against Ankara.
Many issues will be discussed in this summit, and also at the sidelines of the summit, there will be probably a Caucasian diplomatic talks between Turkey and Armenia even. But and again, Ukraine is one of the issues, energy we mentioned. But I want to stay in Eastern Mediterranean because, as Kadir reminded us, this deal is very important between Libya and Turkey, and Greek-Turkish tension is still going on. France is behind this summit, and Emmanuel Macron was very supportive to Greek position, especially in the last year. But it seems that there is kind of easing of relations between Turkey and France a little bit, not totally. From that point of view, do you expect any change from France's attitude? You said Turkish and Italian interests are overlap. And I remember the newly elected Italian leader was very critical to Macron before the elections. So how do you set an equation when you bring Macron and France into this Eastern Mediterranean problem? You know, Greece, Turkey, Italy, all what's happening there?
Well, I do believe that France has been the big loser in the Mediterranean game. If we look at the situation in Libya and how the problems have started, I mean, France was one of the architects that they wanted to bomb Libya and to send Gaddafi away after they signed several agreements. And then France and Macron made historical mistakes by siding along Haftar, I mean, on the wrong side of the story, despite all the rest of the international community in Europe. The key actors in the European Union stood by the UN recognized government. So I think from the French perspective, there is still a sort of frustration. I mean, this feeling of being a loser in the great game of the Mediterranean. And there is this sort of animosity, frustration, and attitude towards Turkey. I will say that if I have to make a parallelism between France and Italy, from a social, psychological point of view, the people of Italy and the country as such has been always very friendly. I mean, we consider Italy and Turkey something more than special friends. While the relations between France and Turkey have been always affected by a sort of mistrust towards Turkey. I wouldn't say Turkophobia, but it has been, I mean, for quite long. I mean, the constant of the French approach towards Turkey has been a negative approach towards Turkey, no matter which kind of government was in Paris. So I do believe that anyway, the position of Macron may be a bit softer, but I would expect, politics is the heart of possibilities. So I can expect any sort of escalation in his tone and in his attitude. And I still believe that with this government in France, Greece will feel safer. I mean, because they know that they have this kind of French government that they are just blocking, and they are supporting the Greek stances in the Mediterranean and the Greek interests rather than the Turkish ones.
Okay, thank you very much, Valeria Guanotta, for joining Türkiye Talks, Director of Observatory on Turkey. Actually, we started to talk about European Political Community Summit, but moved a little bit further and also discussed what's happening in Eastern Mediterranean. Thank you very much for sharing your views.
Thank you for the invitation, and congratulations for the format.
Thank you, Kadir. Thank you very much for sharing your views as well. So that's all. Hope to see you next time.